we never really said it, but the government views airlines as essential, to the commerce of the country and to the DOD and everything like that, mail and everything. So we need to move. We need to stay in business, and we need to be able to adjust to their needs too. So it's important that we be around for not only for our livelihood, but for the government and everything else, so that we can keep the country moving.
Absolutely, and that raises the question that some people have sort of brought to the sort of the center, if you will, now, which is, well, we're a capitalist society, and capitalism shouldn't reward companies that that don't do well and can't turn a profit. Why are we bailing them out? Well, let me address a couple things on that. Okay, First and foremost, what we're getting right now is through the CARES Act, and that's not to bail out the company. The companies are still losing at this point into the $20 million plus a day average, right? So the government's not supplementing those losses. What they're doing is they are offering some money to the airlines so that they can keep people on payroll and not dump that burden on unemployment.
Exactly.
Okay, to me, that's not a bailout. A bailout is basically, you run your company into the ground through the likes of bad decisions or just taking like an extreme amount of risk. And then I think right off the bat, when you use the term bailout, you have people that remember what happened in 2008 when we bailed out all the big banks, and they say, well, we shouldn't do that to the airlines. Well, the airlines didn't do anything wrong in this particular case. In fact, we were having, arguably like the best run that this industry has ever seen.
Right.
So again, this is helping people stay on payroll, not bailing out the airlines. The airlines are still hemorrhaging the cash. And here's another thing too: when the airlines were, quote, bailed out after 9/11, all right, let's put this in perspective here. The airlines were given money to survive because similar thing, the airlines didn't do anything wrong. Something happened that was well beyond their predictability, let alone their control, that basically took them from a position where they're making money hand over fist to just like that, they're hemorrhaging tens of millions of dollars a day, and you can't sustain that. So the government stepped in and said, right. And they said, all right, hey, we'll float you a little bit here. But what not a lot of people realize is that the airlines paid that money back. And not only did they pay it back, they paid it back ahead of schedule and with interest. So to me, that's not a bailout, that's an investment, because you got your money back and you made a couple of points on it. So I'm not saying there's a bias for what I do, but that's the reality of the matter. And speaking to your point, Rob, this would probably make for a separate podcast. Be pretty interesting to talk about this, but no one really stops and realizes how capital intensive it is to run an airline. People hear, well, if they're losing $20 million a day, that's their problem. That's because they're stupid and they don't know how to run their company. Well, no, if you know what actually goes into, let's just look at the debt servicing alone for an airline, right? That's the thing is that, just because you're in a downturn does not mean that your creditors don't still expect to be paid, and if you actually look at what airlines profit, before this happens, this industry was doing the best that it has ever done in the history of its existence, getting somewhere between a 10 to 15 cent on the dollar pre-tax. And that's pre-tax, mind you, profit margin, right? That's a horrible return in any business except an airline, because and the airlines, that's the best that they've ever done. Historically, it's between 2 and 5 cents on the dollar. And again, that's a pre-tax margin. Stop and think about that. Every dollar of revenue that you generate gross, you're lucky to profit between 2 and 5 cents historically, and then you pay taxes on top of that.
Right.
And that's not because of bad decision making. That's economic reality of how this business works.
Yeah. Yep.
People. Go ahead.
No, we're listening. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say. If people really stopped and thought about what goes into this, okay, if they even bother to think about it, they think about the big ticket items. Okay, you have to buy airplanes, and there's fuel expenses, and then there's labor costs. But what do you think insurance costs, right? What do you think maintenance costs? You're talking about buying an airplane that has a unit cost just for a narrow body of tens of millions of dollars per unit, and you have airlines that have to have hundreds of them. And then per the average airline is going to spend probably 2 to 3 times that unit cost over its lifetime in maintenance of that asset. All right. Then you've got, just look at the training center, for example. I always tell people
training.
Not even training itself. What do you think the electric bill is at the training center every day? What do you think? How much wattage do you think it costs to run one of those simulators, let alone 40 of them?
Every air conditioning to keep those things cool.
Right. Every simulator has its own.
What do you think the AC bill is every day?
Every simulator has its own what they call the computer bay, right? And it's a room, usually a 20 or 30 by 30 room,
Mm-hmm.
and it looks just like a server farm. It's this full of computers and servers and the air conditioning and the lighting and the techs. That there's a tech for each simulator just to make sure, because it's a giant computer program that has multi-million-dollar hydraulics and visuals and everything else, and fire suppression. I mean, like you
basically
said,
like, what was the name of that movie? The Whopper 1000
War Games.
War Games. It's like having thousands of those Whopper computers in a building, and that's what it takes to run these simulators.
And that's just each simulator, and that doesn't even account for the cost of the simulator. And those sims run 22 hours a day. At least they do at Legacy. I'm sure that most of the other major airlines have these sims running around the clock, because 2 hours a day, it's for maintenance, and they have to download and upgrade
the software,
and upgrade software, and take care of going through inspections. No different than the aircraft. The aircraft, you have a 10 or 20 or $30 million airplane that is running 20 hours a day on average, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, depending on the fleet and the route. But the other downtime is maintenance, performing phase checks and repairs. And I mean, as you mentioned, Z, the complexity of running an airline in the United States and around the world really it's like its own city. I mean, if you stop and think about it, it's huge. And I've always said that running an airline, or the health of an airline, mirrors the health of the economy. And not just in the US, but around the world. So keeping us healthy, and like you said, it's not a bailout, it's a payroll protection program. What you're doing is you're keeping people off welfare. You're keeping people from having their house foreclosed on, because everybody's personal finances is their own business. But most people, I think, in the country, the last I read, has about 4 months of money in savings or on credit cards that they could use temporarily to kind of float.
Even that much.
After that, especially when you're a pilot and you have a big family, and you probably have a pretty nice house, and so after that, what happens? Then you go into foreclosures. Well, unemployment, foreclosures, all of these things don't show up immediately. They show up 9 months down the road. I think we're in for a rude awakening in this economy.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm anxious to add this to your point, is that keeping these employees employed. I forget how many we were talking about nationwide, but throughout the whole industry, it's like 80,000 employees throughout all the airlines are getting furloughed. Not just pilots, but everything else. And then for every employee, it equates to about 10 workers outside of the airlines, which may get laid off. So, all this payroll stuff is to keep those airline employees employed. That's key, because what's going to happen here in the next couple of months, we're coming up on the holidays and things like that, for the economy to keep moving and survive and improve, all the, you're going to want to go out and spend your money for gifts and and things like that. So for these airline employees, they need that money to turn it back into the economy with their gifts, their travel, if all that stuff. If they're unemployed, that's 80,000 plus people in the country that are not going to be putting money into the economy. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And they're going to be cutting. And not only that, they're going to be cutting services. Hey, I can't have that True Green guy come to my house anymore. I can't afford it. I can't have the guy cut my yard. So there's going to be other, jobs outside of the airline industry. People are going to be losing their jobs there too. So it's a domino effect.
The airline industry employees that the 5M are talking about right now, the 5 mass media major outlets, they're talking about numbers like 80,000 or 100,000 or 110,000 airline employees that would benefit from a payroll protection program. That is the tip of the iceberg that we can see. What we don't see is the mass of the iceberg underwater. Like Rob was saying, you have everything from cabin cleaning services, contracted out catering, fuelers and fuel trucks, and beyond that, the airport employees, airport electricians, airport police, and beyond that, it keeps going in layers and layers. We're talking about maintenance facilities. We're talking about manufacturing of aircraft parts, because when you park half your fleet, that means you're doing half the maintenance. That means you don't need to buy part number 447XYZ anymore because that part's not needed. So manufacturing is going to go down. And we're not just talking here in the US, we're talking globally. Even though we're talking about what's happening to us and what's affecting us, this is happening globally. So the iceberg is much bigger under the water, what we don't see. So it's a trickle-down effect. We've all been kind of saying the same thing. And that's why the payroll protection program, or the P2P, is so important here.
And let me clarify one thing here too. There's got to be limits here. I mean, this can't go on forever. Now, I mean, I think that we are close to a vaccine, and I think that a vaccine will be a game changer. Now, some people might disagree with me, but, where you had said a second ago that, airlines are kind of like market indicators of the economy. I mean, go outside. And I think that, if you look at COVID, I think that you look at people's behavior as market indicator of really where people are on COVID. And I think that a lot of people, I mean, I'm seeing people that, they're going out and they're trying to live their lives as normally as they possibly can. Like right when this thing first hit, I mean, like you went outside and you thought you were in some sort of post-apocalyptic world. Nobody was on the street. Nobody was driving. Nobody was going to stores. Now it's like basically normal, except for the fact that everybody's wearing a mask. And, even in a lot of situations too, people go to the beach and, they're outdoors. They feel a lot more comfortable to not have a mask on, but they're going to the beach. They're not wearing a mask. They're being as normal as they possibly can. They're going to restaurants and sitting down and not wearing masks. Again, people, and what I'm trying to drive at here is I think people's behavior right now is a market indicator of the fact that they are over this, oh my God, we are all going to die because of this thing. I think that we figured out that, hey, certain groups, based upon age or health conditions are at far more risk than, say, a younger person. And based upon that, I think that if we can get a vaccine, and I hate to say it, and I won't go off on this tangent, but the vaccines are being politicized now.
Big time. All of it.
Yeah, look, the FDA is not going to allow this to go out there if they think people are going to get sick, let alone die from this thing. Okay, I mean, politics aside, and I think, and people raise the point too. Well, why do you think it takes 2 or 3 years to get a vaccine? I'll tell you why. It's because of red tape and bureaucracy. That's why. And this administration has cut through that. Okay, and we're at the point where we're going to get a vaccine, but the FDA is not going to let this out unless it's safe. So I think that between where, the market indicator of where people are based on behavior, as well as just the fact that if we get a vaccine, I think we're going to see things open back up. And, the thing is, okay, we can't go on forever with this, but I think we're on the precipice of a vaccine. One more round of this is the game changer to get us to where we need to be. I really believe that. And let me add one other point over here too, sort of relative to what we were talking about a minute ago with bailouts and whatnot. Again, this isn't a bailout. This is payroll protection. And even when the airlines were, quote, bailed out post 9/11, they paid it back and they paid it with interest. So it wasn't a bailout. It was an investment. But even still, what not a lot of people realize, when you buy a ticket and you look at your airfare, I've heard numbers as low as 20% and as high as 30%, that airfare that you're paying, somewhere between 20 and 30% of that is going right to the government. And we're not talking about sales tax. It's going to supplement the TSA, the FAA, the local port authorities are getting a piece of that, right? And I believe the DOT and the NTSB might even be getting a little chunk of that money too. Yeah. So my argument, not my argument, it's my assertion here because it's factually true, is that in a way, the airlines supplement the government as it is. So, hey,
very good observation.
Why not have it work both ways? We're paying a good chunk of the government's expenses here with regard to certain things when times are good. So, hey, when times are bad, I don't think it's out of the question to float us on payroll, let alone maybe give us, maybe a temporary bridge loan at, say, prime plus 2 or 3 basis points. That's not out of the question.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Yeah, excellent. And Matt, I really think that here we are, an aviation podcast, talking about the journey of today's aviator and the challenges they expect, and we're pretty much got this discussion going on where I find
folks, this is the conversation we have in the cockpit a lot. When we're flying around, this is 2 pilots flying cross country right now. These are some of the conversations we have, whether we agree or disagree with each other. This is what we're talking about. This is This is it.
The only thing that's different is it gets interrupted by a radio call, or then in between it's like no, you know what? No, hit line select 3 left, then execute. That's why I didn't do that. Did you get the last time and fuel? Yeah, okay, all right, great. I'm sorry. Where were we? Oh, we were on 2 or 3 basis points above prime. Okay, yeah, let's come back to that.
Global Memphis Center. You still here?
Yeah, hey Memphis, hold on a second here. We're trying to figure out the debt ratio if we pay 3 percentage points or 2 percentage points above prime. Okay, stand by.
We're in the middle of a checklist. Damn it.
That's it, man.
Well, see, this is absolutely amazing conversation. I'm really happy that we were able to share this today.